CALPADS Error Resolution CERT113, Missing Student Initial U.S. School Enrollment Date. So the first step when troubleshooting any error in CALPADS is always to consult the CALPADS error list. Here you see a screenshot of the CALPADS error list for the CERT113 error. The first two columns, the error number and the error name, are used to help you identify this reference material. The problem is described in the third column, the error description. If a student in grades KN through 12, then the English language acquisition status of EL, and then the initial U.S. enrollment date must be populated. And so this isn't English, it's coding. But what it says is if your student is grades K through 12 and the English language acquisition status is English learner, then the U.S. initial school enrollment date must be populated. Things that it validates for is the grade level, the student initial U.S. school enrollment date, and the CELA code, right? So it's going to make sure that you're in grades K through 12. It's going to look to see if that U.S. school enrollment date has been populated, and it's going to see if it's required because of your English language acquisition status. And then a little clarification is given for the error and understanding the error, and then CALPADS provides you with a suggested resolution. So it says all KN, which is kindergarten, through 12th grade students with the English language acquisition status of ELAS, English learner, must have the student initial U.S. school enrollment date populated. Pretty much what the error description was saying, just this is in English. And then populate the student initial U.S. school enrollment field with the date the student began grades KN through 12 in a public or private school, including homeschool in the United States or Puerto Rico. Does not include other U.S. territories. So the only thing that you have to understand is the date that you populate is the closest date or the best date you can find, right? So here's a scenario. The student comes to a California school from out of state, and you have to populate their first grade KN through 12, right? That's a little bit difficult because you don't know the exact date they may have began kindergarten. And so it has to be a KN through 12 date. You can use, in that instance, the date they began the California school because that's the first date they began in the system. However, the intent is to get the initial kindergarten through 12 date. And so if you have access to that information, the first day of kindergarten is desirable as long as it was in a U.S. school. If you have a foreign-born student that comes in as a third grader, never attended private school, never attended homeschool, the third grade date would be the initial date. Typically, you might have students that receive services as preschool students, and they have an English language acquisition status of EL. Even if the preschool was public school and provided in the same district, the initial KN through 12 date. So we want that kindergarten date. So that's important to know. And you could find further clarification in additional documentation. So the CALPADS file specifications is where you would go when you want to find the field definition. And the field definition tells you what's expected. The date of the student's first enrollment in kindergarten through 12th grade, public or private school, including any homeschooling in grades K through 12 in the United States of America and Puerto Rico. This does not include United States territories. In the last column, it says validation. If the initial U.S. school enrollment date K through 12 is populated, then the student age as of that date must be at least 4 years old. Because the earliest date we're looking for is kindergarten. Some states may still allow students to start school at 4 years old and turn 5, right? But we don't want a 3-year-old or a preschool age student. You want at least kindergarten, okay? And then the data guide is always a great resource. Here you can see there's two descriptions of that field element, and SINF 2.36 tells you that you can reference it in the CALPADS file specifications. You see field 36, definition, public name. And so this says, note this date should not reflect the date a student started preschool, right? In the comment, it says this element reflects the initial U.S. school enrollment date and should reflect the date that the student started kindergarten. That's in bold lettering. If the student attended U.S. kindergarten, the date should not reflect the date the student started preschool. So additional clarification is there. Then at the bottom, it says this element reflects the initial U.S. school enrollment date, kindergarten through 12th grade. This element is required for English learners, though the data element is not used to determine English learners. So it gives you the various documents, detailed descriptions of how and what CALPADS is looking for, why this data should be populated, right? And so as you're troubleshooting your errors and you go to the CALPADS error list, it's very general, very technical how to resolve the error, but you don't know why. And a lot of times you have to know why and what's expected to make the appropriate change, rather than just changing data and making it inaccurate. The key purpose, the motivation is always to submit the most accurate data as possible. So, and we wanted to think about what are some of the potential causes for the CERT113. Understanding our student data and understanding the potential causes will help us make the correct determination in how to resolve this error. And so perhaps it was the submission sequence, right? The initial U.S. school enrollment field is in the student information, which may be submitted prior to learning a student's CELA status, right? So let's just say you get a new student. You see the primary language on the home language survey is something other than English. You give them a TBD status and they get LPAC tested. This takes time. This takes days. It may take weeks. But you can submit a student record for the student as soon as they're in your student information system. So you enroll the student, you submit the student information in the student program file. Well, within that student information file is in fact going to be the U.S. school enrollment date. It is not a required field for all students, only ELs and those who are foreign born, okay? And so just the submission sequence, the student information being submitted before the CELA or prior to the LPAC EL status being returned could trigger this error. Another cause could be changes to the CELA status after the initial submission. So maybe you do an error correction. Maybe the student is first reported as EO, and then you go back and you do an error correction to TBD and the student is tested and comes back EL. So there's a way that you could have missed the student's English language requirement in that scenario. There's also no IVR because there's two separate fields of submission. So as we mentioned, this data element, the initial U.S. school enrollment, is also required for foreign-born students, but because the birth country is also in the student information file, IVR, the CINF 0061, will catch it if it's not populated, right? Because you're saying the student's born outside of the country and you don't have the initial U.S. school enrollment populated, we're not going to accept this record. Well, we don't have that for ELs because that's in a different file. Again, at the time that you submit the student information file, their EL status may not be determined in CALPADS yet. And then the last one is it's not required for all students. So again, the reason why this doesn't get populated by default for every student is it's not required for all students. You can update your business practices locally and populate the initial U.S. school enrollment field for all students, and you would never see this because all students would have that date. But because it's not required, that's not typical business practice as of yet. And so we're going to go ahead and demonstrate the resolution steps for CERT113. It's quite simple, in fact. You probably should have a good idea what you need to do from the background, but if not, we'll just demo it anyway. Okay, so here we have the certification validations on the certification detail screen, and we're going to be looking at the CERT113 error. Missing student initial U.S. school enrollment date K through 12. There's only 2 such errors, so we click Show. The 2 students are listed here. I'm going to right-click the SSIDs for the students and look at the record in detail. We're blurring the SSIDs out because we want to preserve the privacy of the student data. Okay, so let's look at our first record. And so student enrollment's not important. However, we're going to confirm that in fact, we have a CERT113. And so we have the student records in front of us. How do we identify what to look for? Well, the first step is always to consult the CALPADS error list. I'm going to drag that before you. Okay. And in the error list, you want to tab over to Fall 1 or whatever submission that you're receiving this error. And here's Fall 1. And you want to sort for 113. I've already done that. As you can see, CERT 113 was selected. And here's the background information about the error. And so the first 2 columns, the error number and error name, are just used so that I can identify this error description, the details about the error in the error list. I don't want to say error description because that's actually a column. And the error description tells you the problem. If the student grade level code equals kindergarten through 12th grade, then the English language acquisition status equals EL. Then the initial U.S. school enrollment date must be populated. And so I don't like that. That's a little bit technical, and I don't think it was written well. And so if you ever read the error description and the problem's not clear to you, in the suggested resolution column, they have understanding the error. This typically adds to the error description. It provides further clarification about your problem. It sometimes will tell you what CALPADS expects to see when you're resolving an error. And so understanding the error says all kindergarten through 12th grade ungraded elementary students with an English language acquisition status of English learner must have an initial U.S. school enrollment date populated. Now that is pretty straightforward. How do I resolve this? Well, below that it says suggested resolution. Populate the student initial U.S. school enrollment date filled with the date the student began grades K through 12 in a public or private school, including home schools in the United States and Puerto Rico. Do not include U.S. territories. And the fields to validate are grade levels, student initial U.S. school enrollment dates, K through 12, and the English language acquisition code. And so the fields validate tells you where to look for a discrepancy, where your comparison is. This is a certification error, also known as a CVR, certification validation rule. CERT errors are validations ran against data in the CALPADS ODS. This is not a submission, so there's no rejected record to look at. So all I'm going to do is look at the student's history or the student's records in CALPADS. And so I'm looking at the grade level to make sure the student is kindergarten through 12th grade. I'm going to verify that the student initial U.S. school enrollment date is populated. And then I'm going to look at the English language acquisition status code. If I don't know where these fields are located, they're numbered 1.25, 2.25, and 12.13. And those numbers coincide with file types described in the CALPADS CFS. There's 2 versions of the CFS, the forms and the Word, which is a Word version, and then the Excel spreadsheet. And here I have the Excel spreadsheet. And you can see I found 2.36. So this probably needs to be updated, student initial U.S. school enrollment date. And that's also why we have the name here. And it says the date the student's first school enrollment in kindergarten through 12th grade in a public private school, including any homeschooling grades K through 12 in Puerto Rico. Although this field is not required, it is required for Fall 1 certification students grade level KN 01 through 12 and the English language acquisition status at EL. If the initial U.S. school enrollment date is K-12 is populated, the student age as of that date must be at least 4 years old. So what does this mean? It suggests to me that the student has to be in kindergarten. We're not looking for a preschool date. That's what it suggests. Do I know that to be a fact? No, I don't necessarily know that to be a fact. And so if I need additional information, I go to additional documentation. The data guide is a great resource for business rules. And so let's drag the data guide in front of you. And I want information about the initial US. So I have 2 results, okay, and that's good. So here's one, student initial US school enrollment date. This element reflects the initial US school enrollment date in kindergarten through 12th grade. So that's the KN through 12, okay, this makes sense. This element is required for English learners, though the data element is not used to determine English learners. Okay, that's some information. What's my next result? Okay, field 2.36. Okay, here's a note. This date should not reflect the date a student started preschool. So that's informative, and it goes along with what I thought I understood. The requirement that a student has to be at least 4 years old suggests to me that the first date could be kindergarten, but nothing earlier. That's what they mean, KN through 12 or K through 12. And then I read the comment, the first paragraph on the top, it says, this element reflects the initial US school enrollment date and should reflect the date the student started kindergarten. If the student attended a US kindergarten, this date should not reflect the date started preschool. So that's good. And then additional information is down here that I'm not really interested in reading right now. And so I just wanted to illustrate how when you're troubleshooting, not just the error list is helpful or beneficial to you. Additional supporting documentation is great. And so I know that I have to verify that the student is in grades KN through 12, otherwise it wouldn't be required. Here's my student record, grade level 10th, so I have a 10th grader here, okay? So it's between KN and 12. Then I look at the demographic record. I can see that the initial US school enrollment is not populated. So just why is it required? Because I can see down here that I have an English language acquisition status. And so probably at the time that all my student records were submitted, the student was TBD. And if they have tested IFEP, it wouldn't have been required. But because they are in fact an English learner, and this came back from LPAC, I now have to go in and update this record. The most prudent thing to do is populate the data element that translates to the initial US school enrollment date in your student information system, and then submit the updated demographic record, right? You can click open, scroll down, populate the initial US school enrollment date, validate and post, but you just want to make sure that you go ahead and do that in your student information system as well if you choose that method. I always advocate for updating the student information system, then submitting the file just so that you can ensure your SIS always is in correspondence with CALPADS, that they're mirror images of each other. So let's see if this second record is the same scenario. So we have a student here in 9th grade. So they would require the data if they're English learner. Student English learner acquisition status is EL. And so we go to the demographic record. And in fact, it is missing. The US school enrollment date is missing. And so this is a CERT113, and it would be resolved the same way. Either you would populate that corresponding field in your student information system, extract and upload the data back into CALPADS so I can update this demographic record, or I can do it manually in CALPADS by opening the existing record, not adding a new record, but opening the existing record, scrolling down, populating the field, validating and posting. So hopefully you're confident I generally feel this is one of the easiest errors to correct once you understand why it must be populated and what dates. The hard part might be trying to determine the kindergarten date. Um, and if you don't have that information, you can go ahead and use the date that a student first started school in California, if they're from out of country, but we're in a previous state, or if you don't have that kindergarten date, um, or you can estimate. There's several different ways to go about resolving this, but we're looking for the initial U.S. school enrollment date. And remember, uh, you can always look in CALPADS if the student is new to your district to see what the earliest enrollment date is populated for that student. Just do a student search and look at their enrollment history and find the first date populated. Okay, good luck with your submissions and your certifications. And hopefully, if you need any further assistance, you know how to submit a service request and we'll be glad to help.